Welcome to the Value of Recruitment podcast with me, Jon Brooks. Sponsored by Atlas, the recruitment platform helping you become an AI-powered recruiter. Welcome to the Value of Recruitment podcast with me, Jon Brooks. I interview recruitment leaders from across the industry to discover how they create value, how they stand out from the crowd, and how they understand exactly what their clients value. Tune in to find out just how valuable recruitment really is. My guest today is Jordan Shlosberg from Atlas. Three things really stood out from this conversation. First, Jordan talks about the value that recruitment agencies can provide that TA can't. Secondly, he shares his experience of hiring and the real pain points. So it's not just about recruitment agencies saving time, it's about, for example, avoiding the frustration of wasted time as a client, as a hiring manager. And thirdly, we talk about taking feedback from clients on how to improve the process to show that we are relational, not transactional. We're showing them that the next time they work with us is going to be an even better experience. Enjoy the show. I hope you find it valuable. So my guest today is Jordan Shlosberg, founder of Atlas. Now, Jordan, is Atlas a CRM?
He's led in with this one. So we call ourselves the anti-CRM purely because the connotation of a CRM is I have to put loads of data in, and for every hour of data that of admin that I do, there is another hour. You can go till 10 p.m. and there'll be another 10 hours remaining to do. Atlas essentially remembers everything that everyone at your company says, hears, reads, and writes, and from that it does all that admin. So you get to do all the things that you enjoy doing as part of this industry rather than the shit you don't.
Yeah. So in other words, recruiters can do more valuable stuff, which is what we want to talk about.
They can do much more valuable stuff. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, let's get into that. But first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Let's launch in with the big question. In your eyes, how valuable is recruitment?
I'm wondering if anyone said not valuable in the podcast. I'm going to have to go back there. But
luckily, everyone says it is valuable. So I hope you're on board with this.
Oh, I very much am. Look, recruitment is a $580 billion industry. So the question is, it is valuable. And my view is, well, the question really is, why is it so damn big? Hiring is really hard. And this is possibly an unpopular, unproven viewpoint, but I'm trying to figure out why can it be that there's so many companies with so much internal talent, yet 580 billion is spent on external recruitment instead. I think internal talent gets a really bad rap. They typically are paid roughly the same as most functions, yet every time a company goes into a downturn, which does happen regularly, they're kind of the first to go always, no matter how good a job they may have done. And I think over time, it creates this separation between the talent team and the hiring managers themselves. And this is a generalization, right? This is very much not all the case, but you do know that when businesses need to tighten belts, it is the first function that gets tightened.
Yeah.
So I think there's not as much a long-term alignment because of that. And at the end of the day, agency recruitment do get paid upon success. So they have a very clear alignment to run fast, because if they run fast and do well, their bank balance shows that. And of course, then there's the old adage of the fact is if it gets paid the most, maybe the most driven people will go there. Again, generalization, but not without its precedent. So I think that that external recruitment market is very aligned with the hiring manager. It doesn't need to go through all the other things that might not be important to the hiring manager. It's very clearly hiring manager needs to hire for whatever reason, and it happens often enough. It hasn't worked. The candidates they've received just haven't been the right candidates. And then they go to this recruiter who, again, is just much more aligned with that hiring manager. So I've kind of asked the opposite of the question because I think it's quite clear that it's valuable. Otherwise, no one would spend any money on it. The why, this is my view, which I'm very much open to changing, but generally I've never heard anyone else say, well, how can it be such a big industry despite the fact that there is resource doing exactly that in so many companies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We're not here to fix internal talent, but yeah, internal talent is undervalued.
Yeah, absolutely.
My concern, I mean, I agree with everything you say. The problem is we're a £580 billion business and we undervalue ourselves. So, yeah, I mean, the reason
it could be a $1 trillion industry if we valued ourselves properly.
Well, exactly. That's what I wonder. I don't think we should sit on our laurels, and we're not even sitting on our laurels yet. We're nervous about our value. We're not confident in our value. But you're right. If we did value ourselves more, it doesn't take much to say, well, would we be worth, could our clients pay us an extra 10%? I think they could if we were better at negotiating, if we were better at putting our prices out. If that happened across the industry, that number goes up a lot.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that is the question is why is it? What is causing certain people to feel not confident in their ability to push pricing? And obviously, it is a homogenous industry. So theoretically, you can say person A does hiring, person B does hiring. And to certain people, they might say, well, this person's charging X%. This is why. So it's the same product. So I'm going to go with the cheapest one. And that is the same issue across any service. A service is always a homogenous good. I'm providing a service other people can provide. But people forget that the outcome of that service is remarkably different. In management consulting, so my first business, Prosapien, we sold into consultants quite a lot. And there were tierings of management consultants. There are the big three that we all know. There's the second tier, third tier, and then there's the tier which seems to be the butt of jokes on those Instagram channels in a way. And it's the same concept of it's the same service that's being delivered. So how can the perception of value be so different? And obviously they've done a very good job in that particular industry, or those who are at the top of it, to push pricing on brand. But you're right, while obviously some people are really good at it in this industry, it's definitely something that is not, I think, not a well-known skill.
Yeah. And that differentiation, standing out from the crowd, and it is a crowded market, is so important. But it's hard to do. Yeah. And you see a lot of recruitment agencies try. They say we're different. They say we do recruitment differently. But then they don't back that up, or their clients aren't able to see the difference. So their clients say, great, you've said that, but I'd like you to match what someone else is pitching.
I think if you go down try to outline why your process is different or say it's different, it almost makes people think the opposite. I think it's outcome focused. As we've chatted about previously, what is the outcome of recruitment? It's we hire someone who's going to make a materially positive impact on our business. That's the outcome. And the higher up the chain you go, the more impactful that is. If you're hiring a great salesperson, they could close $1 million of ARR. An average one might close half that. So the point is that while many people can go and hunt around for a salesperson, there'll be some people that are better than others at doing the same thing, and they will deliver fundamentally better people. So maybe it's that point that a lot of people focus on. We're different because we do X, we do Y. No one cares about what you do in that respect. They care about the outcome, what it's going to mean to them. And then I believe it's kind of the proof points that you can provide. And finally, there's this very nice adage about fundraising, which applies quite nicely here, which is ask for advice, get money, ask for money, get advice. In the same way, a lot of the people that do a really good job is they are putting out content that's interesting, that doesn't have anything to do with this is how I'm hiring, but it's to do with I know how to grab the attention of of my hiring managers or the people I'm trying to do business with, because they will hire. Like everyone, if a business grows, you hire. Quite often people are hiring, which means that every single hiring manager will hire at some point. It might not be the day you reach out to them for any reason, but they will hire. They will hire. And if you've done a good job at sticking in their mind without saying, we're great at hiring, look at this hire we've made in 3 days or that in 5 days, you're just going to be on the ether when people start thinking about, okay, I need to hire and I've gone through my internal talent team and unfortunately for whatever reason, it's not running as quickly as I want, or because of politics of the company, I'm not getting the people that I want.
Yeah. I think you're right. Then that content is so powerful and it's so possible now. LinkedIn especially gives us an amazing platform, podcasts, things like that. Rather than, if you are one of many, then your clients will see you as the same as everyone else. They will expect to pay the same as everyone else. If you are the only one, so if they've seen your content, if they trust your expertise, they say, well, I have to work with so-and-so, then you can set your own terms because the client can't get you anywhere else. You are the only outcome if they need. I've had various people on this podcast who do that very well. Mike had some great examples of people coming to him saying, no, we need you to do this because you are the expert in treasury recruitment. And once your client says that to you, or once you can tell your client is thinking that, then you're in a great position in terms of pricing and negotiation.
You just got to remember that you are in that position because negotiation does involve a tantamount of bluffing. So this gentleman may well be on the receiving end of, well, we got another quote that was 3 or 4% cheaper. What can you do for me there? And at the end of the day, and it's the same thing we would do with pricing our software, is that we always go to the outcome and the value. Is that you think, well, what are you trying to achieve with this hire? You want to hire a treasury person. It's a very senior position. It's going to impact the business quite markedly. You obviously know our reputation because that's why we're talking. If it's the case that essentially that reputation isn't worth the additional £3,000-4,000 for a hire that's $100,000 base salary and then an impact that's multiple times that, if that's the case, then you shouldn't go with me. You shouldn't, if that's what really matters. And when you frame it to the outcome, which is never just I'm paying this commission to make a hire, the person's going to come and is going to hopefully change the business fundamentally for the better. And actually, that's the value that the true outcome of the value that you've delivered. And you should be trying to make sure you always frame discussions around that rather than allowing a customer to frame the discussion of your X%, their Y%. What are you going to do for me?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's the context isn't you versus someone else. The context is what's in it for the client. What's important for the client. And that sales example you used earlier, I love using sales examples because they're so easy to measure. You say someone might be billing $500,000, an average hire might only bill 100,000. That's the difference. That's the difference in quality. So again,
annually. So let's compound that now over the 5-year average.
Yeah.
And that's then, that's the real value that you brought if you're delivering a superior service, which you can quite easily back up once you're starting in the market. If you've delivered one, I think that's the basis for the second, or at least the marketing for the second.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you can't justify why, that's the potential difference of using you versus using someone else. If you can't justify that for an extra few £1,000s on your fee, then you're not getting that value across to your client.
No.
Now, I love to talk to people who have hired, who have been clients of recruitment agencies. So obviously you've hired as a startup, which is a kind of unique position. And then as you've grown your businesses, you've hired as scale-ups and as larger businesses. So talk us through your experience of hiring and what the pain points are, and what you valued or what you would have valued from an external expert.
Yeah, and remember, I did use recruitment agencies with my first business as it got to a certain size.
Yeah.
Atlas is still quite small. In fact, we're just closing a sales hire, and the sourcing was literally a LinkedIn post saying, "Who's the best person who's ever sold to you?" And from that, I got 20 people, 10 of which got multiple references or so. And you think, right, that's pretty good. So I've now done half the interview process because I've got the social proof or the third party opinion from people that have actually worked with these people. So I guess I remember when with ProSapient, my first business, we would use recruitment agencies certainly for some of the more specialist or senior positions. The last one I remember doing was a VP engineering. And if I can recall, it's what made us need to go to an external agency. Firstly, it's time. I didn't have it. It's a lot of effort to run a recruitment process, and it's much more so if you doing that in tandem with your main job. There's this kind of weird thing where you forget that there is a cost of doing two things in parallel. It doesn't take twice the amount of time, it takes 3 times the amount of time, because the context switching you do as you go between these functions does impact your ability to be productive. So that's the first thing. If you're literally just doing the recruitment all day long, you're going to be way more efficient. It's the classic, I could learn how to wallpaper my house.
Yeah.
Or I can pay someone the day rate for the combined experience they have and the focus doing it. And it will look much better. With this particular one, and it was our internal team tried and could not find the right person. It was the same concept. It initially went to the internal team. I think in this case, what I'm realizing is that there are, you can only really specialize in certain functions because you're hiring tech or you're hiring sales. The people you're going to meet and the way you need to deal with them and understand them is very different. And you have to have quite a big intellect to be able to skip multiple people there because they do think differently.
Yeah.
And so we use our internal team really well, actually, for the hires we made regularly. So associates, we would hire 70 a year, the same hire. And so you got really good at that. But we had a 25-person product team with very low attrition. We maybe hired 2 a year. So you'd pull someone doing one thing again and again and again, say, can you look at this completely different function? And obviously they tried, but we weren't kind of getting the alignment. And I'm very particular with the people I want to hire. And I've got some generally the only thing I give a shit about is really performance. I want the best people, and I really don't care where they come from. Now, hiring them this can be very difficult. With this particular guy, I remember the issue is that there was kind of an agenda on the internal talent team of hiring particular things or making sure I would consider lots of things. So one thing I talk about quite regularly is that I don't hire job hoppers, and it's nothing against people that have moved often, because sometimes it's totally rational, valid. However, I'm not smart enough to be able to determine whether someone has moved 3 times in 3 years for very good reasons, or they just don't seem to stick. And every time you ask someone who has moved, there's always a valid reason. I've never, ever met one person that hasn't been able to rationalize why they've moved 3 times in 3 years.
Yeah.
And I remember at this point, I had a bit of a heated discussion saying, look, I'm just not going to interview job hoppers. And they said, oh, but why are you not doing that? It's not fair. What about those who had a really shit time of it? And again, it's like, look, I totally get it, but I'm not here. Like, I just don't have the time to do favors all the time for everyone. I just need the right person in because it's a critical hire. I don't have the time. So I'm going to make shortcuts here. And because, of that kind of mismatch of how to hire, we ended up going to an agency who did a great job. And I really quickly took feedback that I wanted as the hiring manager and adjusted to my feedback without, saying, oh, but we really think you're wrong there, or you should do that. I know what I wanted, and they delivered really well. They delivered a really good quality service. So far, we haven't used agencies in Atlas. I think we probably will as we get bigger. And that's simply because we are still small enough whereby the direct relationships that my team have is enough for me to hire. So I said to the team, who is better at developing than you? And everyone's got one recommendation, and that's worked out quite well. Because when you hire the people that have the same values, ethics, and process demands that you have, and you say who's even better, that the chances are that person is going to be better. And that is driving us through now. Is that going to last to get to a 15, 20 person org in product? Maybe not. And at that point, I might try to hire myself, but I have limited time. And so it might be worth saying, look, I could save 10 grand or 15 grand or whatever by doing it myself, but the cost of me doing this is not signing these clients, which will be $1 million in revenue. So that I think is how I would think about the way I hire. And I've kind of given you two stories in quick succession with different processes and approaches.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I think that last point's a good one. The cost to you, as the CEO of taking yourself off something else like winning clients could be £1 million. Likewise, you're going through a funding round at the moment. Taking your time from that is hugely expensive. And then I like your point about the context switching. It's not just, I need to spend an hour hiring. It's, hang on, I need to get into hiring mode. I need to turn the new tools on. As recruiters, we think, for example, that LinkedIn is just easy to use.
It's not at all.
It's hilarious. You sit down a hiring manager. The hiring manager is never their full-time job, of course. It's a part-time job. They turn on LinkedIn to think about hiring and think, where are the right buttons? How do I do this? So the ramp-up cost to doing that, the time of that is huge.
It took me, for example, for our first data migration, a combined 26 hours to get one database mounted, which took my new hire data engineer 25 minutes to 30 minutes. Now, it was good knowledge because now I can do them quicker, but it was 3 to 4 all-nighters of what on earth is this technology that I've never used before to really understand it. So obviously, it's a massive investment to learn something new, even something where you'd think, it doesn't seem like it's that technology heavy.
Yeah. Of course, the beauty of recruitment is it's not the challenge of using technology, it's the challenge of working with people. So you've got to convince them, you've got to be able to sell, you've got to be able to understand them to begin with, understand their motivations. And all of that is difficult. And again, if you're an internal, you think of that kind of mode switching challenge. If you're mainly managing a team who already know your values, already know the direction of the business, to then take yourself outside of that, talk a different language and start to say to them, look, this is what our business looks like as an outsider. That's a context switch. That's difficult.
You bring on a good point about it's not about just you receiving candidates and saying, this one's good. It's a selling business because the good candidates have more than one person like you who's interviewing them. And if your head isn't switched into how are they feeling through this process, how are they perceiving it, are we selling ourselves to them should we want to make them an offer? You will just end up wasting your time going through giving that candidate a less good feeling about your business than another person who had some people helping and supporting that. And then they won't accept your offer and you'll waste 2 months and time and have nothing to show for it. Apart from a lack of sales because you didn't do any sales because you were hiring.
Time keeps coming up again and again. I think it's really interesting because a lot of recruiters will, their go-to value is to say, I'll save you time. But the way they talk about it is, I'll save you time. It would take you 10 hours to do it, and it'll take me 5 hours to do it. You'll save your 10 hours. But there's more depth to that. It's that context switching. It's
the return on the time.
It's the return on
time. What you're
time.
going to achieve in that time is the much more larger thing.
Yeah.
Because no one believes they're worth their salary. Everyone believes, and possibly rightly so, they're worth a lot more than they're paid. So if you focus on, we're going to save you this many hours, you're essentially saying, that thing which you think you're worth more than, let's use that again. And it's just missing the wood from the trees. Again, we're using sales. It's not about their hourly salary. It's about how much they're going to bill. That's really what matters.
Yeah. And as you say, it's one thing to save time and have the right outcome. But if the client spends a load of their time doing something that's difficult to them and they get zero outcome from it, that's not time. That's frustration. That's such a painful feeling.
Missing your annual targets.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Then your boss says, well, why did you miss them?
Going to board saying, couldn't get revenue because we couldn't hire. And I'll say, what do you mean you couldn't hire?
How high?
And and they'll say, well, everyone hires. How could you not hire? And then it brings more questions. And that's actually that's the problems that come from not hiring or doing a bad job, much more so than the time saving. Or maybe it goes to focus on the fear of loss in a way, rather than the mechanics of exchange time for other time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think finding those psychological points of value and points of pain is so important. Fear of loss is famously twice as painful as other forms of other types of fear around that. So
What's
that is
book,
a good.
The Kahneman book called again?
It's
a great read. Thinking Fast and Slow.
There you go.
Recommendation 1: Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
It is very good. It is very thick. So again, if you don't want to read it all, get an expert in who has.
It's a thick tome, that one.
Yeah, definitely. But there's some great stuff in there, and it's psychology. It's psychology of our clients, and it's psychology of the candidates we work with. So yeah, I think recruiters should know about thinking fast, thinking slow, and all these psychology books.
Everyone is talking about AI-powered recruiters, but what does that actually look like? With Atlas as your CRM, it means every interaction with your candidate is automatically captured and searchable. If they mention their salary in an email, it's instantly recorded without you having to write anything. And behind the scenes, Atlas discovers every company that a candidate has worked for, the industries those companies operate in, as well as things like company size and description. All this means you can do your job much faster and add more value to your clients. To learn more about Atlas, go to recruitwithatlas.com.
We talked about differentiation earlier. How can you give examples of how you see recruiters standing out from the crowd?
So, standing out from the crowd, I think there's a few tried and tested things that I'll see. So they're in no particular order, and I'm not quite sure if they're the be all and end all. But content. This is content that's interesting to your hiring manager, as opposed to content that's passively selling yourself. So while it might be good every now and again to say, we just closed this amazing VPN in 3 weeks, that's okay, but you can't do that all the time. Sometimes I've seen people actually will put the people they've hired and they can say, just found this ex-Google OpenAI exec who's now VPN. Here's the search team. True Search does that really well. I think they're actually a fantastic template for essentially a business that has become the 6th in the Shrek firms from, not going to say nowhere, but in a very short space of time, considering how old the Shrek firms are. I think a few good people, they kind of bring stories from what they hear from their many conversations into content, which resonates, because if you have a good value-added conversations, even they're not hiring conversations with a hiring manager, the chances are that what she's thinking is going to be the same as what someone else in the same function will be thinking. Because we all follow the zeitgeist and we follow the same themes and trends. So if you can become the heartbeat of those trends because you're having all those conversations, then the content you'll make is just going to be interesting. And then you're going to just pop up. They'll follow you passively. And this is probably not sometimes a immediate, I saw you follow me. Any hiring going on? This is to know that you're going to have a top of funnel, which is going to be a large top of funnel and as big as you can make it. Not assuming they're all going to convert, but they just need to be there. And eventually, in that funnel of people that begin to follow you, I think that's what happens, is that they will decide to hire at some point. At some point as well, they may find the hiring difficult. Sometimes it might be that you see them with a job and that job stays open. Or you use that as an in, but once you've got that marketing lubrication, because it's not necessarily that you've had to reach out to them numerous times beforehand, but as long as you know that you're in their sphere, it fundamentally changes the reaction if you do reach out. So I think it's about that. It's about figuring out what is valuable content, short, sweet, nugget of info on a regular basis. And then just remember that they will hire. And if they do need to hire with people, the likelihood is they may well come to you. And again, if you want to be slightly more aggressive, you can still do that same outreach, but now you're doing it with a brand, with a known entity. So people aren't going to be like, who's this seventh asshole who's reaching out to me because I just posted a job and Jesus Christ, I can't, they just give me loads of, crappy, completely missing the boat candidates. I think that's the other thing you've got to remember is, what are you up against? When someone puts a job out, what happens? And it very much is immediately that person's going to get a lot of crap outreach. And then it's like, how do I make my outreach look good comparison?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not just standing out from the crowd, it's standing out from the behavior of the crowd. So if everyone else is saying, here's a CV you might like, even if you think your CV is better, if you're sending a CV across, you're still behaving like everyone else. So behaving in a different way, I think is really important. I think that you said the word stories, and I really like that. We had Miles Hunt on the podcast recently, and he talked about the value within the service of recruitment, that recruiters are almost market narrators. So they're saying, they're translating the market for a client. They're saying, this is what's going on. This is the people you should look for. This is the people we can introduce. This is the salaries. This is what we need. This is maybe what you've missed that's changed since you last hired. You can do that with your content, or you can show nuggets of your content that you're able to do that you're able to narrate the market for them, so that when a client does then come to you, they say, great, I trust you. I trust that you're gonna talk me through this difficult experience, complicated market, and people who are always challenging to work with and challenging to manage, because they're always people.
Exactly. Which and that network effect is way more powerful than I think people expect. Because if you have spoken to an internal talent person recently, or a hiring manager recently, and asked them how many interviews have turned out not to be candidates that match the resume at all, you're going to find a very amusing trend from that. It's one of the most pervasive things where I'm seeing some of the real smartest people that I know, both in internal talent and hiring managers, who are like, I literally have these calls because they're just really well-written CVs, and they have no clue about what is on the CV, and you can almost see them reading from this OpenAI thing. And the problem is that this is the future of well, at least the future of the next year or two, is that when you put a job out, you get inundated with absolute garbage. And even if it's only a small percent sending garbage, if they're sending 10,000 times the garbage, it becomes a very large percent of applicants. So you actually, if you are doing your job and making sure you're having conversations that aren't just around, when can I hire for you? But it's more like, let me give you some intelligence on the market here, I've learned this, I know you're interested in this, and that's that. You're going to be known as a person who knows the industry. And so when that hiring manager interviews the third fake candidate, and they will, and says, fucking hell, what am I going to do? Like, where do I even start? You can say, well, turns out actually that this is the exact mark. I hire React engineers all day long. I speak to at least 3 a day. And that means, I know who's good. And fortunately, because I bought Atlas, all of those calls are recorded and transcribed. So I have this total vibrant knowledge base of all of this conversation in this market. And no one else has that apart from me. And then you're like, geez, okay, that's a unique selling point.
Yeah.
We can't make that up.
And I think, tech is changing so much, and you're part of that, and you're on the side of the recruiter, thankfully. But a lot of tech is threatening, or people say it's threatening the role of the recruiter.
Recruiting's broken. Let's fix it.
Yeah, recruitment is dead. We've heard that every decade for as long as I've been alive. But it's interesting. What tech is doing is creating problems that recruiters are good at fixing. So it used to be, you probably remember, there used to be articles being like, oh, how many people say they lie on a CV? That's supercharged by AI. To now it's like, these are fake CVs. It's not that there's lies on a real CV. The CV no longer matches the candidate, as you just said. It used to be that, I was inundated by 100 applicants for my job ad on a job board. Today it's 1,000. Yeah. At the end of the year it'll be 2,000. Next year it'll be 10,000.
It's the opposite of the cold email. The less it works, the more you send. So you get, well, it doesn't work now. 2,000 resumes today, 4,000 a day.
Exactly. Yeah. Candidates will just keep pressing buttons because there are tools being created for them that say, great, we will put we will help you win the volume game. But of course, no one wins the volume game. What you need is a real person, a recruiter in the middle to say, actually, I know this market. I know the right candidates. I know that they really exist. I know their CVs because I've followed their careers. And therefore, this is the right person for you.
There's actually another side, which no one ever looks at the second order of anything. And let's game theory this through, right? You're an applicant, and you're now a much smaller percent of the resumes. The first natural instinct that I've heard people say is, well, we're going to put like a test of some sort in. Yeah, a really good test that's going to really separate the wheat from the chaff. The problem is, put yourself in the candidate's shoes, who's now saying, it's funny because last time I moved jobs, I invested this many hours in it. Now I'm being asked to do 30 hours worth of stuff. And okay, what that's going to do is make people slightly more selective about what they follow up on. But let's be blunt. There are good people at every function, and those good people are known as good people by certain people. Recruiters are one of those people. And instead of saying, you know what, I don't want to spend my Friday and Saturday evening doing these stupid assessments, I'll go over to Dave, the guy who paid me last time, and say, look, I'm looking to leave. Anything interesting? And he'll say, absolutely, yes, there is. I've got 3 things that I know people are looking for. And suddenly, the good candidates will essentially leave this internal talent roller coaster because they know that if they know that people know they're good, and those people know they're good are incentivized to get them into places where people are looking for that exact person. So all that's going to happen in the end is going to mean that all the people that aren't particularly good are going to waste even more time doing this, and the good people are going to go via recruiters and save their time. And that, in my opinion, if you really work through the game theory of AI, is the outcome that's most likely to happen. Obviously, we'll see how tech changes and new things happening. But I just, and it's happening funny the same way on recruiters. I saw one product, which it looks really cool. It says, you can screen 100 candidates an hour. And it's like, yes, that's great if only you're doing it. But then if every recruiter launches a phone system to screen 100 candidates an hour, suddenly I'm getting 20 to 30 AI screening calls a day. And I'm like, I've got a job to do. Can't do all these bloody screening calls.
Yeah.
So again, it's game theory is through. What are we trying to solve here? We're trying to, the aim of the game is to match the right candidates with the right clients. And the volume game only works when no one else is running the volume game, which is just not true.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. It reminds me of, those little things, prove you're not a robot on a website, and you have to tick the boxes that have a bicycle in or whatever. In effect, we're asking, top people, so finance directors, prove you're a finance director, tick boxes with money and tick boxes with accounting software. It's demeaning. It's a waste of their time. And as you say, it will just put them off and it will push them somewhere else. Now, one area that recruiters can add value is by actually speaking the truth to their clients. So the clients that are being sold this technology say, oh, that's a great idea, and not thinking about that second order issue. Recruiters can actually be consultative, can be experts and say, look, I can put myself in the shoes of the people you want, and I can tell you this isn't the right approach. Let me show you what the right approach is, rather than just saying, you want me to jump? How high? Great. We'll put screening in, and we lose every good candidate.
Yeah, it was that one-way interview thing. I remember when I tried those for the first time. If you remember the one-way interview where you have like a question pops up on the screen and then you video the answer, and you think, well, that's a really good way of getting the data in. The first time I put one in, I think like the response rate dropped like 95%. Like I thought maybe it would kind of down 75%, but it was like almost every applicant, and then nothing good came through it. The only time I've the only time I've ever used those to any thought is when the view was, let's say junior account managers, where I have no clue, they haven't got experience to determine if they're good at their job or not. Generally, to be an account manager, or let's just say software, it's just how do you present yourself? And I think we just it was like 3 very nice questions, like tell me about a funny story. And all I really wanted, I was like, I can't, they're all graduates. They all could be good. All I care about is how do they come across? If I give them a very fun conversation, are they going to come across to me in a way that I can imagine them coming across to my client? And that was the only thing that I was looking for, actually, because I was like, I just couldn't, there was nothing else to try to figure out. Everything else is a gamble. Hiring someone to that extent is like looking at a house from the outside and deciding whether to buy it or not. There's no, people are very complex individuals. They're not just their resumes or what they've done in a particular test. They are, we are complex. Our drive changes from day to day, goes up and goes down. Certain things put us in the doldrums for longer, others not. And none of this you can test. Then there's the classic fixed mindset versus growth mindset. How do you really test that? Particularly if someone's just coming out of university or whatever, and it's their first or second job. It's impossible. So yeah, I think apart from these very niche cases, there's nothing better really than actually building your knowledge of a particular market. And that then becomes the driver of the uniqueness, because that actually is where recruiters can show that they have some specialism.
Yeah. And I've said this a few times now, but the niche, so really understanding your market can be a niche. And I love to see how hyper niche recruitment agencies are getting. Back in the day, it used to be, I'm a tech recruiter. Now it's, I don't know the detail. Name a detailed tech.
Web3 recruiters, right. I've seen.
Yeah, Web3 recruiters. So perfect. You can have an incredibly thin slice of a massive specialism and still be a good recruiter. And of course, almost the thinner the slice, as long as it's still commercially viable, the more chance you have of winning it.
Is it not always commercially viable to an extent? Because if you're placing an 100K salary person, or let's say a 75K salary person, you're earning 15% is 10K. okay, you need maybe, well, look, you need to make 6 placements for 60K, 10 for 100K. So maybe it is commercially viable at certain, even maybe it's not scalable to the extent that some businesses are, but it probably, particularly because recruitment is one of those things which is an entrepreneur's kind of heaven in a way, because everyone is really a business owner and they all go through the same trials and tribulations that you might do if you are building a software business like we are. The same concept. I've got to hire, I've got to make this much money or whatever. I've got a lot more pressure to run not just my own life, but the whole business. And so I think that you can actually do that quite well, even as a single person. So if you can find even a niche that allows you to make a small number of placements to make it pay, it's fine.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, there's the natural nerves, and I had this. Everyone looks at me and says, "Hang on, that's a bit niche, isn't it? Pricing for recruitment." And to begin, I was like, "Yeah, maybe it is," but then you work out, well, hang on. Once you get into it, you're like, "Well, hang on. There's tens of thousands of recruitment agencies, and they all do pricing in a rather traditional way. So actually, the opportunity is huge there." So yeah, I think you're right. Now, one of the things that I think is really important is understanding what your clients, what your customers value. Now, I'd love to get your take on this from a tech point of view. So when you build tech, when you build software, and you're going through this at the moment, there's so many, the opportunities are endless, right? You start off with an MVP base, minimum viable product.
Minimum lovable product.
I'm sorry.
The minimum lovable.
I'm behind
MVP
the times.
Is dead, my friend.
I'm behind the times. Sorry. Yeah. This is not my niche. But you start off with that minimum product. And then you say, great, what do we build next? And presumably you think, well, it's what our customers need, what our customers will value. But how do you approach that? How do you know what your customers value? Or is it that you're more like Henry Ford and you're not giving them faster horses? You're building a car. What's your approach to that?
The prioritization question: what to build, what to make. So, neurodiversity and autism is a friend of mine here because it allows you to think much more objectively and a bit more out the box. And I start with what does my customer care most about? And it's cash, generally in this industry. People want to be able to bill as much as they can with most efficiently. And really, a software that works well will deliver that. It doesn't matter the feature that it uses or how that feature works. What matters is I'm using this product and I can see that I'm making more money. That is it. So we work back from that. There's obviously the basics, the non-negotiables in these core systems that you kind of have. And when we think about how we're building out, we know that we've unlocked 1% of this market. There are features we do not have that if we did have, we would have more customers. Contract management will be the core example of that. But you can't please everyone all the time. And it's absolutely on our roadmap, but we've got to remember that we have customers now and they're growing quickly. And we've got to make sure that we don't fall into the same trap as every other software platform, which generally is featureitis, i.e., don't double down on the thing you've built, build another thing new because you've done that feature now. There's so many examples of software where they've just got a plethora of average features. And when you speak to the customers, and particularly when we think about or speak to the customers, or our customers who are formerly someone else's, one of the common pieces of feedback is that, they make some cool features, but they seem to not do the basics. And you get a pass from that for some time, but if you don't understand that your product or a feature is not finished in its first iteration, you're going to lose. So I'm cutting a short story long here, if you've noticed. So what do? I think about a few things in parallel. Firstly is what do I need to do to unlock the bigger markets? And I think about it saying, okay, by the end of the year, I want to be able to really sell into big enterprise and contract businesses. So somewhere there, I've got to make the features they need. The second thing is the quality of life features. So it is the acceptance and acknowledgement that the features you've built should always be improved. And generally, the way I think about it is I try to be really non-precious and say, what do you hate about Atlas to our customers? I'm actually, and it will come out in the next couple of weeks, like we will do a what do I hate about Atlas bi-weekly to our customers. I want them to feel, because there's going to be some annoyances. Of course there is. Any software, big software that says, oh, ours is bloody good everywhere and everyone loves to use it is just delusional. You've got to say, look, guys, I'm totally happy to slate an aspect of the product. Tell me, because like if you don't do it, I'm never going to know. There's 1,000 things that I could possibly make, and I need your steer to help me figure out what to do. So I want the visceral parts that you hate. In a product that you generally love, it seems, there are things you hate. What are they? And I then prioritize those items. So what has the visceral hatred typically? So there's a portion of development that goes on that.
Yeah.
And then again, it's the what features impact revenue the most. So therefore, to bring now our long story back to short again, there's 3 things that go into my head. One is quality of life. So we have a percent of our development is always to what things are people complaining the most about from features we've built already. And that can go from one small little thing to a collection of small things. One thing, for example, is that you can't archive campaigns. And so in the BD term, you have loads of them. So there's now bigger and bigger lists. And so just a really small thing, it takes 3 hours to fix. So this is being built this week, in fact, because I did a little survey to say, right, what we want to do a BD overhaul. What do you not like about that? And then they tell us and we say, brilliant, we'll fix these 10 things. Then there is we also want to make this, what's going to make the biggest impact to revenue. And so our current view there is AI tagging. So we know that there's a huge, people can't find their people without these tags that they never do. So using an AI there. And the final thing is it's the magic matching. So it's not just here are some recommendations for no reason in particular, because they are, you said you wanted a front-end engineer. Here are front-end engineers.
Yeah.
It's a much more deeper, this is the competencies in here. And this is based on all the conversations you've had. This is why this person meets those competencies. That's going to win. It's things like being able to say, you see like a VPN from Google, and you can write and say, which of my clients talked about really wanting to work at Google? And then it brings it up. And then you can say, so I had a conversation with Jane last year, and all she talked about was Google. And what a surprise that you've got one open. Like, if that spec resume or that spec email landed there, I'm not going to guarantee you that it's going to work, but it's going to read much better than the other 50 specs that go there saying, hey, here is Dave. He's a senior XYZ and keyword 1 match. Yes, he's got that keyword. This is the thing which I know that we deliver these features, our clients will bill more. So that's kind of 60% that, 30% the quality of life, and then 10% on the, I know I need to build these few things to unlock by the end of the year.
Yeah. I think that's really nice. And I'd like to spend a minute just translating that into what recruiters can learn, because I think that all 3 of those things are relevant. So I think that, that what bugs you question, I think is a great one. And actually, recruiters are often saying, how can we stop being seen as transactional? Now, if we go to our clients and say, great, what could we do better next time? We're showing, not telling, that we're not being transactional. We're thinking about the next time. We're building that relationship. So that's a really powerful way of, firstly, improving your service, but also in showcasing and highlighting, we're going to be here next time. This is for the long term. This isn't a one-off transaction. It's like, we'll try someone else next time. This is, we're going to work together on this. We're going to improve together on this. You're going to get a better result next time by working with us than you did this time. So I think that's really powerful.
One thing that you can do, it's a little psychological trick on that thing. People very unlikely to give you honest feedback.
Yeah.
There's a psychology of you need to give someone permission, because if they say something that's constructive and they feel that it might hurt the wrong way, they won't. It's so easy to say, "Oh, it was great, no problem, it was great," because you essentially, because then if you say improve, you might bring a negative feedback, and no one wants to deal with someone's hurt feelings. So I would always frame it to say, "Look, really pleased with the hire. I reckon we did a great job, but to be honest, there's definitely things I want to improve upon. Could you just give me the one thing that you can think of that we could have done better this time?" So almost tell them there was something to be improved upon, and you will actually get that feedback. Whereas if you say just simply, "Oh, anything we could do better," they'd say, "Nah."
I really like that. Yeah. And actually, again, it shows that you're the expert. You're good at these processes. And you say, look, that was, I'd give us a 9 out of 10 for that. There are 4 areas, and I can tell you, there are 4 areas I think that were maybe 7, 6 out of 10 that we could improve on next time. What's your one thing? And I'll
That's quite good. You say, "I think I know. Let's see if we match.
Yeah.
What do you think I think it is?"
Because you should know. You're the expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit like you shouldn't go in and say, "Great, how do you want to hire?" So hang on. You're the expert here. So in the same way, you shouldn't say, "Oh, how should we improve the process?" You're right. It should be, I know the process. I know that we didn't get 100% on everything. I am going to have that iterative improvement in our process. I'd like you to feed into that. But yeah, giving that permission is really important.
By definition, you're going to be memorable by that point, because very few people understand the psychology of that. Because when I think I got it, it may have been from Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. Again, there's 10 books that I recommend consistently and all the time, and you're a lunatic if you don't read it. This is one of those books. Is that psychology of permissioning, because when someone does it to you, you'll realize that was brilliant because I actually said my honest views, and then you might even say, "Why did I do that?" And then you realize, because they almost made it like they knew there was there, and so I felt comfortable telling them that because then we were discussing together. I think that's what, moving back to Atlas, this is something we're doing really well, because I'm very upfront about the product, the amazing things it does, and the occasional bug that comes along. I think people have been much more forward and happy to say, "Yeah, Jordan, this is not quite working the way I want it to," because they now have seen how I act and operate and respond to feedback, and they realize that it's not going to really hurt my feelings. And so they actually give it more. And then that becomes way more valuable than the classic, the product interviews you can do.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's building that relationship, which is what recruiters want to do. The second point from your approach to understanding your clients, I thought was, if you're going to build something great. Don't build something average that is just going to kind of fade away or make you look worse. When I sit down with recruitment leaders, quite often they're saying, "Oh, can we do subscription recruitment or recruitment as a service or mini RPO?" Yeah, that's almost 3 ways of saying the same thing. And I say, well, what value is that going to create? And what are you going to add by doing that? As you said, you can't please everyone all of the time. Just adding something on because it looks good, but actually you're not delivering a great service. It actually detracts from the value you create most of the time. It confuses the pitch. It confuses the conversation early on. Yeah. So really thinking through that. And then your number one thing, focus on that core context. What are we trying to achieve here? Zoom out. What do our customers want? For you, cash, revenue. That's what you can help recruiters with. And if everything you build is focused on that, then your customer is going to be happy with what you built.
And it's function. In recruitment, it's functional. If I'm hiring an engineer, it's I cannot deliver the products that I want to deliver without this person. So without this hire, I'm not going to make the amazing, cool thing that I believe is going to propel my business. Without that salesperson, I'm not going to hit my revenue targets. Without that customer support person, I'm going to see churn increase. There is always a foundational outcome of every person, and you need to understand that, because then you're talking to the pain point, which, as the adage about vitamins versus painkillers is a really good startup one. It says, the common thing is if you're building a startup business, you should focus on a painkiller, not a vitamin, because, and the classic example is employee review software, the classic vitamin that no one does well, and you think, I'm going to make a great employee performance review software, and no one ever adopts it because it's nice to have, but it's not going to kill me without it. And that's the point with hires. Without making the hires you need to, you lose something that you are planning to achieve. And as we know, it's very hard to say, well, you're now going to have to accept you can't do something you wanted to do. What one are you going to drop? Try and ask a product person, of those 4 things you really wanted to do, now you've got to get rid of one of them. Which one are you going to get rid of? Okay, maybe 1 they'll get rid of, not 2, they'll struggle. When you build these plans, they almost become non-negotiable. And the capacity, the human capital plan is a requirement to deliver that. And that is the pain.
Yeah. And I think, we've talked so much about how do we prove our value. If you can say to a client, I'm in your shoes now, I'm thinking like you've got 4 things you want to deliver, and without a great person, you're going to have to drop 2 of them. It's like their fears are being voiced out loud. That's so powerful, rather than just saying, I'll save you a bit of time, or I'll get you some good people. If you can get in their head and work out what that loss is that they're most fearful of, then you're delivering huge value.
There's so few services where you can say, if you don't have it, what happens if you don't have your employee review software? Just do it on Word. Okay, fair enough. And there's so many services where, what if you don't have that? We'll manage. But people, that's where they won't. If they're hiring, obviously the need is there. Obviously, if you've got a bloated org, they're probably not hiring and going to cut people. Fine, it's going to be more, we don't need these 10%. But if they're hiring for a clear purpose, which will not be fulfilled otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we've covered so much in this. I think we've learned so much from the analogies around tech, and how you build software, and how recruiters can think about how they build value. We've learned from you as a hiring manager. So thank you for sharing that. And yes, obviously we've heard about Atlas and how you're trying to help recruiters actually focus on value rather than doing the admin. So Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Atlas for sponsoring the Value of Recruitment podcast. To learn more about how Atlas is creating an AI platform that helps recruitment agencies generate more placements with less effort, visit recruitwithatlas.com.